Hello guys, welcome you all to Sunya IAS. Today's topic for mains article discussion is Indian Space Policy 2023. The policy has been recently unveiled and you understand that this policy is at that cusp moment when India is thriving so high in the space arena. Our projects are not just cost efficient but are also belonging to cutting edge technologies. India is making its way into soft power space diplomacy. India is giving its satellites to SAARC nations for communication purposes. Moreover, we are launching the projects, we are launching the satellites of different countries in a very cost effective manner. Indian space industry is going to boom. We will talk about the stats into it. What is the growth rate, double digit growth rate into Indian space sector? Therefore, it is very much imperative that we have a policy, that we have a framework at the place. The main agenda of this policy is about giving weightage to the private sector into the space industry. How we want to incorporate the private sector, because space industry, is a very high end industry. Into this, research and development takes a important stage. Research and development. Now the role of ISRO, you will find that, is more of a mentoring institution, is more of a guiding institution towards the hand holding of private sectors. Now we want to nurture our private sector. We want to bring in investments from the private sector into the space industry. You have found that globally with respect to the NASA also. So many private sectors have incorporated over there, SpaceX, Virgin. Similarly, in India, the private sector is picking up the industry. The hand holding job is of ISRO. Along with it, the research and development task, for example, the missions, for example, Aditya L1 mission, manned mission to the space, Gaganyaan mission, Chandrayaan mission, these kind of missions will be conducted by the ISRO. But if we talk about booming into the internet industry, OTT services, for that, we want to give access to the private sector into the space industry. So slowly, what we can call it as privatization of space industry. This new Indian space policy is talking about, and it is also leading towards a framework how the things will happen. Moreover, the private sector will get access to the facilities of the ISRO at a very nominal fee. So these things are going to happen. Now let's understand, for the mains article discussion purpose, how the journey started for the India. What were the initial phases? How we picked up the growth during the times of liberalization? Slowly and steadily, how from creating the technology into the research and development. I'm particularly calling about the cryogenic engine. Initially, we were a country where technology acquisition was our goal. From technology acquisition to doing the research and development into the space arena has been a big task. Now let's understand the basics of Indian space ages. You can see here that the first space age to the second space age we have moved. What was the demarcating point into it? Previously, in the first space age, ISRO as the sole player, ISRO was the sole player of it. No other private sector was participating. Minuscule private participation was there. And because, private participation will eventually lead to commercialization. So here you will find a topic from where the question can be asked in your examination: commercialization of space. We'll see the impacts of it also. What are the challenges we are facing because of the commercialization? How the space junk is being created? Kessler effect. What could be the output of it? But still, what are the benefits of the commercialization? We need money for the investment purpose. So ISRO was the sole player. Private sector has a very limited, very very limited. It did not participate much. Because of it, limited commercialization. Understand that what if government is doing anything? Because of limited commercialization, the investments were, the objectives of the research and development into the ISRO were solely focused on meteorology, remote sensing satellites, and communication satellites. It was specific to this area only. Minimal private investment. Tech, India was focused totally on technology acquisition from the countries which have already demonstrated, for example, USSR, USA. So we were on the way of technology acquisition. Along with it, we were also building our capabilities. Along with the technology acquisition, we were building our own capabilities. Now understand the time, all of sudden, when private player, emergence of private sector, how did this private sector emerged? You have to understand that with the emergence of internet. Now internet gave birth to the OTT platforms, over the top services. You understand? You remember the time, you know, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, right now we are talking about. Before that time, little bit of internet only on the cafes we could serve. For that, what happened, very new time. If I'm talking about in your childhood, you could remember that dish connection or cable TVs licensing or commercialization was happening because of the emergence of private sector. License for different kinds of channels used through this communication satellite. From these communication satellite, licenses were issued. Because of this licensing, more and more participation from the people, more and more consumption of the internet goods, communication goods came, and therefore private investments also increased commercialization. This led to the increased commercialization. Into it, what happened, many private player came, just like Skyroot. You can note down these names also. Skyroot space, Pixel. Okay, so these kind of antrics, private for the privatization, antrics. So private players increased, commercialization increased, demand increased from these channels. Smartphones right now, you understand, they are consuming a lot of internet. Because of it, government realized into the second phase that we need to have some government initiatives to cater to the demands, to develop that framework. Here we are right now. Okay, this two topics, that government initiatives and new horizons. Into this government initiative, this is one of the policies, Indian Space Policy 2023. Otherwise also, we have developed in space Indian National Space. This program is about developing, promoting an architecture for different kinds of policies related to the space. In space, Promotion and Authorization Center. Okay, in Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. This center will work with different kinds of private players. New Horizon mission. New Horizons is about developing a cutting edge technologies like small satellites, Kalam satellite, Kalam satellite, small satellites. Okay, mini satellites, miniature version, developing different kinds of propulsion system. These kind of satellites, propulsion systems give way to venture into cost cutting, making it more and more efficient, so that tomorrow if sector develops, right now only we are dependent on communication technologies, understand that. Defense and surveillance technologies, ASAT mission Shakti, what we call anti-satellite mission. Okay, moreover, tomorrow if space tourism starts, is India ready for that? This is what we need to understand into this private sector participation over here. Now let's move ahead and little bit give a look to the India's history of space policies, its journey, how it started, and what things happened. So what happened here? Early space policy. Our space policy started back in 1972. 1972. And first satellite was launched in 1975. So as soon as the policy was at its place, it started to work. And at that time, we were just about launching some satellites, making a vision for peaceful use of space, peaceful utilization of space for scientific research. From here, what happened that you come to the arena of liberalization and privatization. I'm talking about 1990s. As soon as liberalization and privatization happened, infusion of money from private sector started. Okay, private sector started to participate into it. And for that, what we understood in Indian National Space Policy 2000, our objective was to make the space industry an growth economic engine for us. Space industry and economic engine. To make the space industry economic engine. After that, what happened in after 2000, 2010s? We realized that not only a minuscule participation from the private sector is going to help. What we need is startups. We need startups. We wanted to focus on the startups into the space. Startups into space. We wanted to promote them. Then came the Draft Space Bill 2017. This bill talked about developing a holistic legal framework, for regulation of private sector, You understood the emphasis is about participation of the private sector. So this bill talked about it, and recent developments in 2020s, you will find that in space, antrix, okay, in space, antrix, and whatnot. Here, what we are talking about, small satellite launch vehicles, SSLVs. Small satellite launch vehicles. Here, the objective is about serving the private needs. Private participants will come, privatization will happen, and moreover, what will happen that private players will serve the local needs, niche demands also, where the role of ISRO will be limited just in hand holding, mentoring, and providing them access to the technologies. Okay, so now let's understand the India's space economy statistics related facts. Okay, due to growing space policy, double digit growth, you will find that the space economy is going to touch approximately $60 billion industry by 2030. It will become so huge industry. It is approximated that somewhere around 50 to 70 billion dollar industry. And here into this, global space market, India wants to create its footprint. India wants a larger chunk, larger share of this market, particularly of India. Expanding satellite manufacturing capabilities, you understand, by the year 2012 only, 2012 itself, 2012 only, we had more than 100 private companies, and right now in India, actively participating, there are 400 private sector companies, 400 private companies. Of course, I understand that you do not come to listen to the names of many companies, but what happens, all of them are not launching satellites, but they are manufacturing some parts, small parts, for particular satellite launch vehicle, for particular designing of communication or remote sensing equipments. So there are private companies that are mushrooming, private space companies. Manufacturing capabilities, what we have demonstrated here is we can manufacture the most cost effective satellites, into the manufacturing capabilities. And this industry, particularly satellite manufacturing, if I talk about, $3.5 billion industry. Understand, if I'm talking about space and I'm talking about particularly satellite manufacturing, there are two differences into it. Into the space, it is a holistic umbrella sector, but particularly for satellite manufacturing, $3.5 billion industry. By 2025, By 2025, it would be $3.5 billion industry. At present, it is approximately $2.1 billion industry. And India is showing the capability of making most cost effective satellites. Therefore, many foreign nations want to collaborate with India for launch of their own satellites. This is what I'm talking about. The statistics are showing that India can create a huge impact on the global space market. Private companies, we have talked about growth potential of Indian space economy. If we look at employment generation, just tell me one thing. If this industry will grow, $60 billion industry, as soon as it grows, it becomes larger in chunk. Will it generate employment or not? Yes. Therefore, it is having a potential to generate more than 2 lakhs of jobs. You understand the time I talk about, the boom into the service sector all of a sudden. Similarly, here you will find that boom into the space industry, space arena will happen. More than 2 lakh jobs will be created for that matter. Promising sectors. Now you understand space industry abhi kya kar rahi hai. Initially, in the first phase, we have talked about where we were focused: meteorological study, remote sensing, just communication. Right now, different kinds of promising sectors are opening, broadband, just like broadband, 5G, OTT services. Because of that, even promising sectors, I talk about space tourism, manned mission to the space. So these sectors are making much more room for the growth of this industry. It is not limited right now. New sectors are opening up. Technology development and space application programs. Different kinds of technology demonstration we are doing with respect to agriculture, disaster management, early warning systems. For that also we need, for security purposes also, we need this industry to boom into our economy. Now, what is the need for the space policies in India? What is the need for space policies in India? Enhancing surveillance and defense capabilities. Students understand. Surveillance and defense capabilities are directly dependent on our systems, radar system. How does it work? If you look at a situation when a ballistic missile is fired from a different country, how do we get the understanding? The radars are at the different locations, but for the communication purpose, we need defense satellites for that matter. Okay, dedicated either for Army, Navy, Air Force at different locations. Therefore, from the satellite, the monitoring of our territorial boundaries will happen. We need satellites. Okay, first is the surveillance and defense capabilities. For territorial defense. Similarly, for the second aspect that you need to understand is about internet security or cyber security. Cyber security also we need. From internal security perspective, there is a strong need for it. Now, space-based missile defense. Now you understand what is a space-based missile defense. You have understood that ASAT mission, anti-satellite mission, it is called as anti-satellite mission. We, India, became the 4th country in the entire world to demonstrate this technology. ASAT mission, it is also called as mission Shakti. What happened here, for example, if a country fires a missile from this using the space technology into the defense capability, we have developed this satellite. Okay, what will happen that our satellite will at that lower earth orbit, LEO, in the lower earth orbit, any satellite is going to attack us, that also we can tackle from the missile defense system, space-based missile defense system. We can tackle from our ground only. This is the capability, this is the cutting edge capability we are building. Promoting technological innovations and economic growth. You understand that the innovation or research and development is the backbone of any growth. What happens here? Stimulating economic development, boost space related businesses. The businesses needs to grow for that matter. Harnessing satellite based applications. Apps, if we call about apps or blockchain technologies or technologies based on 5G and 6G. 6G already research and development are happening into that matter. For that, in the satellites, what happened? There are transponders, big transponders are used, Ku band, Ka band, L band. Okay, from these transponders, communication happens. If we develop more and more technology and our communication satellites can cater to these needs, these kind of innovations will boost our economic growth with the help of uh, advancement into space technologies. Facilitating collaboration and diplomacy. Facilitating collaboration and diplomacy. Now you understand what happens. First, we nurtured our space sector. After its growth has reached certain level, that we have acquired, we have developed that kind of technology. Now we want private sector to invest into it, to make it grow, to make it bigger, to cater to the most of the market demands, to capture the global space market. Now what we are doing, we are leveraging it at the international relations platform also, to get that advantage into diplomacies, that is called as space diplomacy. Engaging in international partnerships. अब यहां पे क्या किया हमने? सार्क सैटेलाइट, सार्क सैटेलाइट. This is how we lead. We have given the satellite GSAT-19 to the SAARC nations and have helped them for the communication and technology purposes. This is called the leadership skill that India is showing. Ensuring compliance with international treaties. You know, India has signed the Moon Treaty but yet not ratified the Moon Treaty. All other treaties regarding space, India has signed and ratified also. We have to maintain certain compliance because space, we understand it as a common resource for all the humanity. Okay, just like Antarctic Treaty, we have Space Treaty also, to comply with the international treaties. For example, demilitarization of the space. How do we manage the space junk? These are the issues. We cannot keep the nuclear weapons into the space. This is threat to all of the humanity. So India will create compliance with international treaties. Leveraging global resources and expertise. So in the wave of globalization, we have learned that interdependence became the touchword. Interdependence, with in terms of economic efficiency also. But later on, we found that this interdependence is being weaponized by the countries. For example, the global value chain is weaponized by China. Most of the items are manufactured over there because of the cheap labor and the infrastructure they have built. Weaponization of energy by Russia is happening. Similarly, what happens here, leveraging global resources and expertise, you will find that now India is developing its uh, soft power diplomacy and expertise into the space that it can leverage to get the things that we do not have. We can get this leverage for the exchange of certain things at that international level for the diplomacy purposes. Okay, so now let's move ahead and understand the key features of Indian space policy. What are the key features? The key features include here vision for flourishing commercial presence. I have emphasized with you the presence of the private sector. Commercial presence is important over here. Clear roles and responsibilities. Here you need to understand that the Department of Space, here we have created two specific bodies. One is NSIL, New Space, okay, India Limited, and another body that we have created is In Space, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Okay, department. Now these two bodies are going to create this framework. Okay, here what you need to understand is these two bodies on one side and ISRO on another side. Now when we are talking about ISRO's focus on research and development, it means that ISRO's sole focus is going to be on the research and development and on cutting edge technologies. Whereas the participation of non-government entities, what we call the private players, how that will be facilitated? from the NSIL. From the NSIL, New Space India Limited will provide a framework where what can happen, the private sectors can have a single window clearances, that how the policies will be there, what are the regulations I need to follow, single window clearances will be given. So NSIL will facilitate the participation of the NG, non-government entities. Okay, it is going to be a regulatory body. Stable regulatory framework, you need to understand that the framework means what, the conditionalities, the rules and regulations for the licenses for the participation of the NGE, both domestically and internationally. Here what happens, it should not just be stable, but it should be predictable also. Stability and predictability, that how the framework is going to change. Opportunities for private sectors, we want to explore all kind of opportunities for the private sectors, whatever they want to do. It is not, their role will not just be limited in assisting the ISRO, but we want to talk about the commercialization of the space industry. They can develop their own, satellites, they can operate it from the ground stations, they can collect the data, they can sell the data, whatever information they are generating for the specific purposes, it can be holistically owned and operated by the NGEs, non-government entities. These are the opportunities for private sector players. Previously, what has happened, that in collaboration with ISRO, you have to perform. Okay, enhancing overall ISRO missions. Enhancing overall ISRO missions, what happens that, if I talk about NASA, okay, they collaborated with SpaceX of Elon Musk. What happens, that technology transfer happens. Enhancing overall ISRO missions, it means that the private sector will get to use the framework of the ISRO facilities. Now what will happen, they will pay certain fee and use the ISRO facilities from the infrastructure point of view. Simultaneously, what benefits the private sectors will get is one thing, but ISRO will also be benefited from the technology transfer of the private sectors. That is the point. Institutional setups will be done, making Indian space program more and more competitive. You understand that in the international market, becoming the competitive is the most important argument. And here what happens, by number of iterations, by number of times of the practices, we reduce the cost reduction, reduce cost. That will make the program more viable for us. That will make the collaboration with international partners more viable and make Indian space market a more lucrative market, more cheap market. You're getting this point? ISRO's focus on research and development. And what will happen? You have to understand these two bodies. If we talk about the framework, here is the framework. This is the framework I'm talking about. This is the framework. This is the framework I was talking about. They will develop a framework in space and NSIL. In space will design about the policies, that how it can be nurtured, what things we need to explore into the space regarding that, and NSIL will provide as a regulatory framework for the private sector's non-government entities to participate. Whereas the role of ISRO right now is little bit limited. It has to reduce its role to research and development on the cutting edge technologies. Why we need to invest into that direction? Because you understand the private sector is there for the profit maximization. Little bit of R&D they would also do, but it is the onus of ISRO to put it at the top level, the high level technologies which require certain more gestation period, more fundings to operate. Therefore ISRO will limit its role to that. Now let's understand a little bit of distinguishing features of the space policy, and I expect that you will remember this particularly. Okay. Emphasis on private sector participation. As I have already told you, it is going to be $60 billion industry, $60 billion industry by 2030. Therefore, our focus is on the participation of the private sector. Civilian and peaceful applications. Now, whenever the private sector is participating, our emphasis on the peaceful and civilian use. Civilian use means 5G, broadband, the internet services, these kind of technologies we need to develop for that matter. Restructured roles and responsibilities. Okay, if I talk about restructured roles, here again you need to understand NSIL, in space, and ISRO. ISRO's role has been restructured, the responsibility has been changed. Specified roles of in space for single window clearances, induction of non-government entities, that is private players. The induction of non-government entities, that is private players, that needs to be enhanced. These are the objectives. Now we have discussed about these things in detail. Okay, so now let's understand what could be the challenges into it. What could be the challenges into it? So lack of regulatory framework and commercialization challenges. Here you need to understand that without robust regulatory framework, if we are launching into private sector, what havoc it will play. We have, although we have talked about now that NSIL or this body NSIL and INSCAPE is there. They are going to talk about the regulatory framework. But do we have a robust regulatory framework at the place? No. This is one of the major challenge. Without that, if we will promote the private sector, what could happen, what disaster could happen? It could create a risk of monopolization, monopoly. For example, right now if you take the case, despite so much regulatory framework into the telecom sector, most of you understand it is mostly a monopoly of Geo, Reliance Geo, because of the predatory pricing, how it launched it. Therefore, we need to maintain competition into this market of space industry. Otherwise, it will hinder the new entrants into the market. You are getting this point? Therefore, it may lead to monopolization. Plus, regulatory framework about space debris. Understand, till now, most of the countries of the world will find that the space programs are led by state owned entities, whether it be NASA, whether it be ISRO. But when so much mushrooming of private companies, like 400 I have talked to you, going forward they may increase to 600, 700. If they are launching certain satellites, after the satellite becomes defunct, okay, after the life cycle of satellite, what plans do we have to bring it back or remove it from the orbit? Otherwise, the space into the orbit will be limited. So our policy, Indian space policy 2023, need to address this challenge. How to manage the space debris? Kessler effect, in which what happens when one defunct satellite, you know, collides with another defunct satellite, acceleration, momentum is generated, and it may collide with the operational satellites also. It may hamper the communications, defense, surveillance technologies also. Technological and strategic challenge, technological dependence. Despite we say that cryogenic engine, Vikas 2 engine we have developed, but despite these things, we are dependent on many other countries for technology transfers. We need to reduce this thing. Otherwise, the mushrooming of private sector will create more and more dependencies. Strategic competition and geopolitical factors. We have competition with China in that market. Okay, with US, China, and you understand that here China and US have each other at the loggerheads. Okay, they are at the loggerheads. Trade war, currency war between US China is happening. Therefore, the repercussions of these things will happen there in the space domain also, and we do not share very friendly relation with China. Okay, so these geopolitical factors needs to be also considered in the development of the space industry. Funding and resource constraints. Whenever private sector we are talking about, they are going to bring money, but what happens that to developing that infrastructure, that framework in which these parties, non-government entities will be allowed to function, we need certain funding to, you know, expand the space sector, space industry. Security and policy constraints, weaponization and militarization. What if tomorrow we are militarization of space happens? Our policy, what I'm telling here is that there are certain issues this policy did not address that should have been addressed effectively. Weaponization of space, Indian space policy 2023 should have addressed it. It should have said that we are going to emphasize it for peaceful purposes only, for the scientific researches only, for the communication, for the commercial purposes, civilian and commercial purposes only. International collaboration and cooperation is the need of the hour. It is a challenge without which the development of space sector can be nullified altogether. Policy framework and governance, here you understand that the major lacuna, ये सारी बातें तो ठीक हैं, these all are criticisms or challenges. The major lacuna this policy has is no timeline. No timeline for two things. One is the ambiguous transfer of responsibilities of ISRO. When the ISRO will come into its role, governance, I'm talking from the governance perspective, policy framework and governance of space administration. When the ISRO will transfer its role towards only research and development industry, and no timeline for setting up a regulatory legal framework for the NSIL and in space for incorporation for the involvement of NG non-government entities, there is no timeline. Therefore, what will happen, these because of these ambiguities, it will keep on hanging, hovering on the policy, or what we call as policy paralysis also, that may happen. Although this is a new sector, we are making policies, but these are the areas that should have been addressed. These are the challenges that the policy is going to face. Now understand what could be the way forward to it. Into the way forward, we have divided into four components that you need to understand. First component is about strengthening regulatory framework. Without regulatory framework, if non-government entities, private sector is participating, it could be disastrous. Therefore, we need to comprehensively review our policy to fill up the gaps into the inconsistencies and to develop the best kind of policy that can provide a regulatory framework, legal framework for enactment of a competitive environment, conducive environment for the private sector participation. Enhanced public private partnership, we want to enhance it through the regulatory framework. Therefore, the kind of conducive environment should be created by robust licensing and compliance. By robust licensing, predictive policies and compliance of those policies. We need to ensure that the policies are being complied by the private sectors. This is how we have to develop our regulatory framework into the space arena. Promoting technological advancements. Research and development, that is the goal of ISRO. But apart from that, what happens that if we do not nurture the field, some industries are there who have the potentialities to grow and participate into the space sector. For that, skill development programs needs to be promoted. Promoting technological advancements through skill development programs. There is mission from the ISRO itself where they are nurturing different kinds of courses. If you go to the website from the Department of Space ISRO, you will find that some programs are there where they will kindle the interest and understanding about. If you have learned physics, mathematics background, if you're from that background, you can participate into the learning programs of ISRO. This is about skill development. Encourage startups and SMEs, small and medium enterprises, to participate into the ISRO's programs. Research and development investment, this kind of basic R&D and awareness about the space development is required. Ensuring security and safety, paramount important is, despite we have so much programs over there, but safety and security is quite important. Space situational awareness, the how we'll achieve the space situational awareness? By data sharing. By data sharing, international norms are there. Even if any country is launching a particular kind of satellite into the space, international norms are there. For example, some defunct satellite of China is lying in the space. Tomorrow, a satellite from the NASA or ISRO finds that defunct satellite. By looking at the logo of it, we can claim that this is the satellite launched on this that date. That kind of data sharing is happening. Cyber security measures, that I told you, cyber security measures. From the internet, many loopholes are there. How we are using the ICANN, the body that regulates the whole of the internet system. We have to maintain that cyber security measures, and it should be incorporated into the space policy itself. International cooperation on the security, basically we are talking here about space security. Demilitarization of space. Demilitarization of space. Strengthening international collaboration in the matters, as I have told you, the global order is changing from the, multilateralism to to plurilateralism to minilateralism. Now, minilateralism, along with economic efficiency, we want security also. For that, nearshoring or friendshoring is happening among the countries, strengthening international collaboration. Nearshoring of the countries interested into the space policy should happen. Bilateral and mutual partners must be developed. Okay, as I have given you example of SARC satellite diplomacy, similarly, mutually also these can be bargained. India gave, internet connection to the Bangladesh Maitri project, and they are giving us water. Participation in global initiatives, wherever international policy standards are being made, there India's stand is very important, and we need to participate over it. Space data sharing will bring more statistics about the private sector participation, about the growth of the industry, about the future potentials, and how India is performing into whole of the space sector. Hope this way forward and this policy you have understood. I have focused while discussing the whole article that specificity should be there in your mind. The statistics, the data, the developmental stage we have seen some challenges, inconsistencies into the policies, and what are the distinguished features of the Indian Space Policy 2023. Okay, so thank you guys, and for the notes, join the Telegram channel t.me/Shunya Notes 50, and you can basically relate this discussions, the mains article discussions, with the GS1, 2 and GS3 booklets of the Sunya IAS, and there you will get an understanding about how to, basically sometimes what happens while studying those books, you are not able to comprehend the topic exhaustively. Here you will get to understand how to utilize that book in the best manner possible to get maximum marks in your examination. GS1, GS2, GS3, these booklets. So thank you guys, and keep revising.